For decades, we've been told the same story. You gain weight because you eat too many calories. But what if that story is only half true, or maybe even completely wrong? Inside your body, fat cells don't automatically expand just because food is available. The real signal that tells them to grow is something far more powerful, a hormone called insulin. Scientists have demonstrated this in controlled lab experiments. Imagine a petri dish filled with fat cells. Around them is a nutrient-rich solution packed with calories, everything those cells could possibly need to grow. Yet, they remain tiny, inactive, almost asleep. Nothing changes until insulin is introduced. The moment insulin enters the dish, the transformation begins. Within hours, those same cells start filling up with fat droplets. Check them a few hours later, and they're even bigger. The difference is undeniable. It isn't the calories doing the work, it's the hormone. And this is where the myth about eating less and exercising more starts to fall apart. Because if insulin is high, your fat cells are being told to store energy no matter how much you cut calories or how hard you push yourself at the gym. That's why so many people struggle endlessly with diets that never seem to work long-term. But here's the most convincing evidence of all, it comes directly from humans. People with type 1 diabetes who don't receive enough insulin can eat enormous amounts of food and still remain extremely thin. Why? Because without sufficient insulin, their fat cells never get the command to store energy. Tragically, some even take advantage of this by deliberately using less insulin to stay slim, risking their health in the process. This proves one powerful truth. Fat gain is not just about calories, it's about hormones, and insulin is the gatekeeper. If your insulin levels stay high, fat cells keep expanding. But if you can control insulin, you finally gain control over your weight. And in this video, we'll explore exactly how to do that, through simple, science-backed strategies that work with your body's biology, not against it. Fasting is often praised as one of the most powerful ways to improve metabolism. And while it can be effective, it's not always realistic. For many people, fasting requires planning, discipline, and a lifestyle that can actually sustain it. That's why researchers suggest a simpler, more practical approach, something often referred to as the insulin trick. The idea is simple. Instead of trying to starve your body, you work with it by using eating habits that naturally keep insulin under control. And here's where things get interesting. Most people assume mornings are the best time to eat, but in reality, your body is already in a state of higher insulin the moment you wake up. This effect, known as the dawn phenomenon, is triggered by your body's natural rhythms. A few hours before sunrise, your cortisol levels begin to climb. This is completely normal. It's the body's way of preparing you to wake up. Cortisol tells your liver to release stored glycogen as glucose into your bloodstream, giving you the fuel you need to start the day. But here's the catch. With more glucose circulating in your system, your body also becomes slightly more insulin resistant in the morning. In other words, when you eat breakfast right after waking, your body is far more likely to store that food as fat instead of burning it for energy. This explains why even people who skip dinner as part of intermittent fasting often don't see the results they expect. The real issue isn't just when you stop eating at night, it's also when you start eating in the morning. Those first 2 hours after waking up can actually be the worst time to put calories into your body if your goal is fat loss. In the early morning, your body is already riding a wave of hormones, especially cortisol and insulin. That's why the worst thing you can do is rush straight to the kitchen after rolling out of bed. Instead, give your body time to settle. You naturally wake up with a surge of fast-burning energy designed to kickstart your day. Use that window wisely. Spend 20 to 30 minutes walking, journaling, stretching, or even planning your schedule. Both your brain and body are at their sharpest during this period, so take advantage of it before turning to food. And when it does come time to eat, be intentional. Skip the typical sugary, carb-heavy breakfast that floods your system with insulin. Instead, treat breakfast as a mindful ritual. Slow down, notice the process of preparing your meal, and choose foods that stabilize blood sugar rather than spike it. This small change can reset your metabolism and set the tone for a healthier day ahead. Here's why this matters. Overnight, your body has already been fasting. Insulin levels naturally drop while you sleep, helping your cells become more sensitive again. But the moment you break your fast with something sweet or starchy, all that progress is undone. Unfortunately, most modern breakfasts around the world are little more than dessert, loaded with sugar and refined carbs. Making the switch tomorrow morning could be the simplest yet most powerful strategy for better metabolic health. And there's another piece to this puzzle: sleep. Your cortisol levels follow your circadian rhythm, which means poor sleep throws everything out of balance. When you don't get enough rest, your body interprets it as stress. By morning, cortisol may be 2 or even 3 times higher than normal, and that spike pushes insulin up with it. The result? You feel hungrier, less in control, and far more likely to crave quick fixes like pastries, bread, or sugary snacks. Cortisol doesn't just affect metabolism, it also influences the brain, driving stronger cravings for carbohydrates in particular. That's why managing both your sleep and your breakfast choices can make or break your fat loss efforts. Here's where things get even more fascinating. Cortisol doesn't just circulate in your blood, it actually crosses into the brain. Once there, it binds to receptors in key regions like the hypothalamus and the amygdala, areas that directly control hunger, cravings, and reward. In the hypothalamus, cortisol stimulates the production of powerful appetite-boosting proteins such as neuropeptide and agouti-related protein. When these proteins are activated, your drive to eat skyrockets. At the same time, cortisol weakens the effects of leptin, the hormone responsible for signaling fullness. The result? You feel hungrier, less satisfied, and more likely to keep eating. Meanwhile, in the amygdala, cortisol increases dopamine release, the same brain chemical tied to pleasure and reward. This makes you crave energy-dense, highly palatable foods, think sweets, pastries, and carb-heavy comfort foods. In other words, cortisol not only makes you hungrier, it makes you hungrier for the wrong kinds of foods. But there's another hidden trigger most people don't realize: coffee. We tend to think of coffee as harmless, or even helpful for fat loss. But according to research, drinking it first thing in the morning can actually spike insulin levels. And here's why. In the morning, cortisol is already naturally elevated, which pushes glucose into your bloodstream. When caffeine is added to the mix, especially if you pair it with carbs, your body responds with an even larger insulin surge. One study, published nearly 2 decades ago, documented this effect clearly. Participants who consumed caffeine alongside carbohydrates required significantly more insulin to clear glucose from their blood than those who ate carbs alone. Put simply, coffee plus carbs in the morning forces your insulin to work overtime. That's why experts suggest holding off on coffee until later in the day. By waiting, you give your hormones time to stabilize and avoid creating unnecessary metabolic stress right out of the gate. The morning hours are the most predictable time to do this. Cortisol and insulin follow a clear rhythm, and by aligning your eating habits with that rhythm, you can set yourself up for fat burning instead of fat storage. Getting your morning right doesn't magically melt fat overnight, but it creates the foundation for sustainable progress. A well-timed, balanced breakfast tells your body to use energy instead of store it, curbs cravings, and makes weight loss feel less like a constant battle. It's not about quick fixes, it's about creating the conditions where fat loss finally becomes easier, more natural, and long-lasting.